without further ado, we hope you enjoy the conference, and I am very, very excited to introduce you to Mr. Michael Chappie Grice. And I would love to say a bunch of lovely things about him, but it's all in your conference booklet also. Please do read. He has an amazing variety of credentials and backgrounds and experiences, and he rolls out all into what we hope will be a very meaningful presentation, and we are very, very excited to have him. He was recommended by Tony Broadus. Several of you know Tony, so thank you, Tony, also. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Michael Chappie Grice.
I want to thank Candy Scott for putting all this together. It's nerve-wracking for me to be here, but it's really nerve-wracking for the people who have to put the conference together, arrange for all the parking, the hall, the food, the logistics, and all that. If anybody's put on a conference, you know what it takes to do it. I've only just a minute, 60 seconds in it, forced upon me. I can't refuse it. I didn't seek it, and I didn't choose it. I will suffer if I lose it, and I have to give account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but all eternity is in it. That's from the president of Morehouse College, Benjamin Mays, back in the day. We have a tradition, the African tradition, and if you know much about all of our heritage, the oldest bones in the world were found on the continent of Africa, so you all have your roots and origins in Africa, even if your skin isn't as dark as those who are born and living in Kenya. Nonetheless, I am very thankful to be here, and in that tradition, before I can proceed, I must get permission from my elders. Seeing that there's nobody in the room older than me, I'll ask Mr. Tony Broadus if you would stand, and may I ask you to stand in for our elders, and you know Aunt Margaret and the friends that we've had, my mom and family. I ask you, may I proceed? Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Without that ancestral permission, you must sit down. So now you're stuck with me for another 45 minutes, and I'll go straight forward as fast as I can. There's lots to talk about, but we're here to talk about being fair. I know that resonates with the concepts of justice that you might have, but this is being fair to you, being fair to your potential. Oftentimes we hold back. Oftentimes we say, well, it wouldn't be fair for me to put my ideas on the table, and yet we are about a couple things: elevating and accelerating your development, and particularly the development of children. We have something called the Cure for the Common Classroom. It evolved out of something that we did in San Francisco called Infusing Responsibilities for Intellectual and Scholastic Excellence. We just did one thing. We infused, and we only infused one thing: responsibility. And we gave that to the youngsters, we gave it to the schools, we gave it to the teachers, and we gave it to the leadership. Because as you will discover if I have the privilege to speak to you during the workshop about those correlates of effective schools that Dr. Ron Edmonds introduced to us, and it talks about the ways in which we can be effective, and the reasons that we can be effective, and the reasons that we can rely on our gifts and our potential, and the need for us to develop and cultivate our confidence so that we might use those gifts. He said it like this: we can, whenever and wherever we choose, successfully teach all children whose education is of interest to us. We already know more than we need in order to do that. Whether we do it or not must finally depend on how we feel about the fact that we haven't so far. I'll give you that again near the end, because I want to begin and end with that kind of purpose, that great research that has informed schools, particularly schools of high achievement. Let's do a little demographics. How many grandmothers do we have in the room? Got a couple? All due respect to our grandmothers. We have Mrs. Grice, who has joined me today. Thank you for helping me along, Gwendolyn. And she has some artifacts over on the table that you'll get a chance to see, some films and some books that we have generated out of World Arts Foundation Incorporated, a local nonprofit in Portland that has produced the 31 consecutive years of a tribute to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And we're very, very happy about that. There's a story that comes out of Argentina about a ruler from a village, and he had something called a cowtail switch, and it was wrapped in valuable gold thread, and it had a cow's tail on the end of it, and he used it to move the air about and to rule. And one day he put down his cowtail switch and picked up his javelin and went into the forest to hunt, and he never came back. When he left, his wife was pregnant with their fourth son. And when that son was born, eventually he spoke. The first thing that he said was, "Where is my father?" And the other three sons said, "Well, he never came back. Maybe we should go hunt for him." So they did, and they went into the forest and they marched. They knew where he had gone or where he typically would hunt. And after 3 days, they found a pile of bones and a javelin laying next to them. They said, "This must be our father." He said, "You know, he taught me magic, but I was never to reveal it." The first son spoke up, says, "I know how to take these bones and make them into a skeleton." And so he did, worked his magic. And the second son said, "Dad taught me magic too, but I was never to reveal it. I know how to take mud and leaves and shape them into a body," and use his tool and sculpt it until his father was right there. And the third son spoke up and said, "You know, Dad taught me magic too, but I was never to reveal it. I know how to breathe life into a still body." And so he got down and the father came to life. They put his royal cloak on him and they marched back into the village, and he got there, he put down his javelin and picked up his cowtail switch and said, "I shall give my throne to that son of mine that is most responsible for my return." Which son was it? Shout it out. The fourth son, the one that breathed life into him. Anybody else? What about that baby? Now, before a child can speak his first words, several years have gone by. I don't know what his other sons were doing all that time, but they weren't looking for their father. But once they got that clue, once they got that question, the right question, their whole world changed. And so it's your job to ask the right question so that you can get the right answer. And the other thing that we learned from that, from your favorite people in history and in antiquity, whether that be Plato or Aristotle or Ptah-hotep, is that a person is not dead until they are forgotten. My professor, he would remind us as you go about building your career, as you go about building your purpose, even for this school year. How many do we have in here who work in elementary schools? Raise your hands. How many people work in high schools? How many people work in special education? Anybody? Good. I want you to make a note. It's good for all of you, but particularly for those people who work in special education. Reuven Fierstein. You can find it in the research documents. And he had developed something called instrumental enrichment. And it is very famous. It's relatively expensive to install it, but it's very good and talks about the way in which leadership can evolve and actually make a big difference. I specialize in 4th and 5th graders. I could tell you a story about why I don't work with 1st and 2nd graders, but kindergartners, 1st and 2nd grade. Any kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade teachers here? Please stand and let's give these people applause. These are the people that give them the groundwork. When I received a national award from the National Education Association in New Orleans a few years ago, they asked me they read my bio and all, but the thing that I declared was, I'm a teacher. I worked all the way up to the superintendent's level. Anybody in here aspiring to be a superintendent and to take on the responsibility of running a school district? They may need you, particularly if you're sharp. And this is what I'm talking about, living up to your potential, investing in yourself in such a way that you could serve at the highest levels. Anyway, our professor, he had a jar big bell jar. And he put rocks in it and got the rocks in there, and you couldn't put any more rocks in there. And he asked us, can we get any more rocks in there? No. So then he reached down and pulled out a bag of pebbles and poured the pebbles in the jar, and the pebbles settled all down among the rocks. He said, can we get any more pebbles in there? No. Then he reached down under his desk and pulled out a bag of sand and poured the sand in. The sand settled among the pebbles. He said, can we get anything else in this jar? Now, we're all completely baffled and fooled, and we don't know what the answer is now. He pulled out a jug of water. He poured the water in. The water settled the sand. He poured more sand in. He poured more water in until there was no more that you could get in the jar. Here's the point. Get the big ideas in the jar. Don't fill your life, your career, your aspirations with the pebbles, with the chatter, with the sidebar talk. Get the important things in first. Because if we are distracted and if we fill our jar with pebbles and sand and small talk, we won't be able to put the major things that are important in there. The love, the questions, the relationships, and in the case of you who are educators, the rigor and the expectations and the engagement. I built my career on just 3 strategies: a rigorous and relevant curriculum, an engaging learning environment, and high-quality relationships between the school and the teachers, between the teachers and the student, between the home and the school, high-quality relationships. And I work with a gentleman by the name of Mr. Ken Berry, who is the executive producer for this year will be 32 years of our tribute to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And our motto, the way that we've managed to keep it going all these years, is frequent and high-quality communications. That is, with your best friend, the way that you would do, the way that you work with your colleagues, as often as you can to communicate and to always tell the truth. With my 4th and 5th graders, we have something called the Ambassadors Club. And the Ambassadors Club we have in 4 schools, 4 public schools in Portland, inner city schools. And we say we have you do just 3 things. This is what we expect of you. And I'm telling you these things because these are the things that in 40 minutes I can tell you that you can rely on. There's lots of stories to go with it, particularly when we talk about our days on the railroad. And so Rick and Candy were kind enough to come over to the session that I had at Oregon State recently. They took my 30 recordings that I used to build the film Black Families on the Railroad in Oregon and the Northwest, which chronicles the migration of African Americans who worked on the railroad and came from the South and the Midwest and landed in Portland. And during that time, we learned a great deal about what integrity looks like. And that's how they managed to keep their job, and that's what we want to pass along to the students. Let's do these 3 things. Take notes, ask questions, observe virtue. And if you can get your students, if you want to see them elevate and accelerate to achievement, to excellence in achievement, if you can get them to take notes, to ask questions, and to observe virtue, that is going to be key to their having greater success in school. Something that we learned from Dr. Asa Hilliard, and I hope that you look up his research. Dr. Asa Hilliard, he is a foremost educator and elder and one of the most respected educators in the United States for his research on talent development and on bringing people to their full potential. So when we get to that question of virtue, it's more than just being a nice guy or being right or being honest. The virtues are these, and these are what my 4th and 5th graders. If we can roll that video clip, you'll see some kindergartners. And I want you not to be distracted by the costumes that the teachers wear or anything like that, but I want you to see something that really makes a difference. And the virtues are truth, justice, propriety, reciprocity, balance, harmony, and order. So when we ask the students to take notes, so many times I visit classrooms in the high school to give a talk about a particular topic. And what I find is the students, they're sitting there being entertained and soaking it up, but very casual in the way that they go about their learning. They aren't taking notes. They can't possibly remember all the things that are being presented in the class. And the teachers, in many cases, don't insist that they take notes. But the best teachers do. The best educators do. The educators who are fulfilling their potential, who are being fair to their own potential of what the gifts that they bring. You have gifts. And each of your gifts is a little bit different than the person who's sitting next to you. And I hope that you make a list of your gifts so that you can exploit them. Maybe it's the gift of writing. Maybe it's a gift of caring. Maybe it's a gift of organization, which you can contribute to your school or to your community. When I'm talking about your community, I'm talking about your learning community. We had something called the Council of Principals, and then we had the Council of Sixth Grade Teachers. So we would have job-alike people who could share, and if you don't have this in your school, let me suggest that you give it to your leadership, that there are times that you use your professional day, your professional development time to collaborate with people, either all the sixth grade teachers or all the science and mathematics teachers. And by the way, we wrote a little book while we were in San Francisco called No More Math. How many STEM advocates do we have in the room? Anybody in here that's interested in STEM? I want to come back to at the end of my remarks, I made a note about being prepared for this 21st century, upgrading your own skills to be effective with technology. We take it for granted. It's all around us, but many of us are very far behind the curve in the ways in which we can apply technology. Schools are doing their best, and how many people in here work in a school where every classroom is equipped with the capability to access the internet during classroom? Many of you, but not everyone. And without it, believe you me, the kids have got it on their wireless palm device on their phones. So getting the students to take notes, to ask questions, and to observe virtue, the virtues truth, justice, propriety, reciprocity, balance, harmony, and order. You know how to put the big rocks in the jar. It's important for us to appreciate something that we sometimes take for granted, and that is we live in a culturally pluralistic society. Some of us are more comfortable with it than others, but we do live in a cultural pluralistic society. And of course, the cities around Oregon, where you might reside, come from, or work in, aren't quite like we had it in San Francisco. In any given classroom when I would go in, or any given school that we would work in that one school, we would have Chinese, Japanese, Korean, South African, Samoan, Latino, African American, European American, Slavic American, all in one classroom with those kind of heritage. Here's what you can do. Even if you just have Canadian and American students in your class, even if you only have 2 or 3 Latino students in your class, ask each student to identify what their family would select as their hero or their heroine, and put those pictures up around the walls in your school, in your classrooms, at the classroom level, so that they can learn, so that they can ask the right question. Well, why is Cesar Chavez so important to us? Why is he so important? There's a reason. And it's not just that people favor Latinos, but there's a reason. And as you discover why people have attached value to their heroes and heroines, you can take advantage of that cultural pluralism. It's not something that we should sweep under the rug, or not something that we should cast in negative terms. It's something that we have the opportunity to exploit. And in so doing, you demonstrate courage. You demonstrate a means for encouraging students. So many of our students in today's world are without confidence. And one of the particular scientific, well-researched ideas is the cycle of success. if you can get it going in the right direction. If you set the bar for me right here and ask me to jump over it, there was a time, Tony, that I could jump over it. A 5-foot high bar in the high jump, right? Of course, now people jump out the moon. But if you put that set for me, I can't make it, and I probably won't try. If you put it down here right at my ankles where I can step over it, well, that's easy, but that's not a challenge. But if you set the bar at the right height, when I do jump over it, I feel success. And you can move the bar up a little bit. And then I make that, I feel success. And that success feeds my expectation and gives me an opportunity to put forth the effort to get over a little higher bar. So think about the ways in which that you can get your students to look at the next highest level of achievement for them. And as we design curriculum, remember the 3 things that I can promise you. There's not very many promises that we can make that we can certainly fulfill, or that we are willing to bet, for me to bet your career on. A rigorous and relevant curriculum, an engaging learning environment, and high-quality relationships. For many people, relationships really, really matter. I won't go into the research of Dr. Edwin Nichols. If you look him up, you'll see how he identified that some people relate more to objects and to material world. Other people relate more to people and relationships. And you have to figure out that value. But everybody loves to get a hug, an emotional hug, if not a physical hug. But touching is not allowed much anymore. You have to be very careful who you hug. But you know what we can do? Come here. Yes, sir. What's your name? Gerard. See that handshake right there? I'm touching him. And he can feel me, and I can feel him. And as you get your students to learn that particular gesture, that particular way of greeting, thanks, yeah. Gerard. I was calling you, but you didn't move fast enough. So, what's your name? Zach. Well, the last time somebody, like they say, excuse me, my name is Zach. Zach, would you please come up? When you're giving a talk, it's always good to be able to identify a couple people in the audience. I saw Gerard, but I hadn't linked in with him. But Zach, I've connected with him. Rigor and relevance. It's got to make sense to the kid. Life must make sense. Rigor really is a code word for mathematics. Remember I said we wrote a book called No More Math? Only mathematics. No more math, only mathematics. Let's make our students begin to think of themselves as mathematicians from the very beginning. We can, with a simple adjustment in the linguistics. And we find that different schools, many of you have experienced this year we try this reading method or this reading series. Next year we try this science group. They move it all around, and it's kind of hard for us as public school teachers to follow. There's an old African proverb that says, if you don't know where you are going, any road will take you there. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And our job, from our vantage point, is to transform schools. So to the extent that we invest in the rigor, that we elevate our expectations and move students along the pathway to really being good mathematicians. In a classroom, now I brought 2 artifacts. Here's one. All the students in the ambassadors program have a pocket dictionary. It has all of the words that they're going to encounter, most all of the words. They found a couple that aren't in here. But for a couple bucks, they've got the entire English language in the palm of their hand. I said, this is a toy we want you to play with. You call Mr. Grice if your teacher says, put that away. You've got the entire English language in the palm of your hand. All the words in here are spelled correctly. They're given the part of speech. This is one of my ambassadors right here. He's got his. And they're required to keep it with them at all times. When they come into class, they have it on their desk. That's how I count them as being present. No book, no dictionary, you're not really here. Now, for accounting purposes, well, yes, you are. You're filling a seat, but you're not here. You're not with us. And not only that, which section of the library does this book belong in? The reference section. So now you've connected them to that place on campus that every college, from Howard University to Harvard University, from Western Oregon University to the University of Oregon, the University of Portland, Santa Barbara, right in the center of campus, they've got a library. Oftentimes, it's the nicest building on campus. It certainly is the quietest building. It's the place where you can go to do the main thing that our students who are here at this university are compelled to do, that they're paying money to do, and that is to study. So we connect them to this kind of rigor, and all the words are conveniently organized in alphabetical order, and this book can convene. My only other artifact is this sack of quarters, which I use for buying newspapers and plugging parking meters, keep it in the little pocket on my car, but I also have one that I take to my classes. You wouldn't think that a quarter would matter very much. You should see the kids competing to get that quarter, because even, it's kind of like golf. We don't play for, much prize money, but it's not a matter of the amount, it's who's got it, who's giving it to whom. And so with these kind of incentives, and Mrs. Grice and I raised twin daughters, and we each had a different role. She raised them, and I had the role of being the backstop, because they asked me, you just be quiet, okay? And the backstop, if you go down to the baseball diamond, there's a big structure right behind home plate. It's there rain or shine. It's sturdy. It catches all the foul balls, so they don't have to run down the hill. But it doesn't say a word. It just does its job. And speaking of doing its job, one of our friends in Portland, a gentleman by the name of Claxton Welch, a great athlete, played for University of Oregon, went on to play for the Dallas Cowboys. He said that he played for Coach Tom Landry. And Tom Landry, you remember, was one of those really dapper coaches. Always wore a sport coat, always had a little hat on, walked the sidelines. He never did much rah-rah. Mr. Welch told us he never gave us the rah-rah speeches and chewed people out loud. He said he just had one thing: do your job. Do you know your job? Do your job. And that's how he won X number of Super Bowls. I don't remember exactly how many. I know Claxton Welch got 2 Super Bowl rings working with Tom Landry. So know your job and do your job. When I was privileged in San Francisco over that 14-year period to hire teachers to come into schools, we just had 2 criteria. 1, that you love children, and 2, that you know your stuff. That you love children and that you know your stuff. You didn't have to know all the policies. You didn't have to know all the research. You had to love the children in a way that demonstrated that you knew what you were doing. Can we roll that little video clip? Somebody got? Okay. Everybody does. Thank you, Candy. Everybody does. Don't think that you're exempt. I think the last thing that I want to land on is, let me give a little detail to rigor and relevance, making it relevant so that the students will continue. But the engaging part, the engaging learning environment. Reginald Clark, who wrote the book called Why Poor Children Succeed and Fail in School, simply did this. He took all of the students that were in the experiment, in the research, who were at the same level. In other words, he controlled for race, gender, socioeconomic status. So basically, it was apples compared to apples, except for one thing. The people on this side of the room were achievers, and the people on this side of the room were not achievers. These students were performing, and these students were not performing. Why? This is what he found out. That the students who were performing were engaged. Engaged is defined as reading with comprehension, writing with clarity, computing in mathematics. And there's a lot of elaborations on either one of those. Reading with clarity and comprehension, writing with clarity, and computing. All of them were doing that. But the performers were doing it 3.1 hours per day. And the non-performers were doing it 1.1 hour per day. So think about your classroom. Think about your sessions with the students. Think about what your school is developing you to do, what they're insisting on, what they're expecting of you. And if you can accomplish, if you can improve the level of engagement, the ways in which they are relating to you, the ways in which they are participating in class, and a lot of that depends on your school, particularly on your school leadership, the ways in which that they are asking the students to perform, giving them a rationale of why we go to school, helping them understand just how important it is. I was describing to Eric, the young man who was helping me, he and Chelsea helping me set up and I thanked them. What would we do without, we call it that tech guy? And then Chelsea came in and said, well, it's not a tech guy, it's a tech gal. Thank you, Eric. That we engage our students in ways that really are meaningful. The more that you can engage them, the more that they will perform. If you allow them to not take notes, to not ask questions, to not observe virtue. And when we invoke the virtues in the schools, truth, justice, propriety, reciprocity, balance, harmony, and order, ancient virtues from 8,000 years ago, justice hasn't changed. And that's what I'm here today, to give you the message of you being fair to your potential of what you can bring to the arena of public education. You're so badly needed. You're so badly needed. And for those of you who can learn this, who can acquire this, who can seek this in your own way, because when we talked about the ways in which we delivered infusing responsibilities for intellectual and scholastic excellence, we didn't proscribe do this, do that. Teach it in your own way, but be effective. Look at your data. Look at your school's data. Don't wander around. Stay in your lane. Do your job. I was trying to do my job, and I was working on the railroad, and I worked with a guy named Smitty. He was about 300 pounds. He was the conductor, and he was so funny. I said to him, I said, there's a lady out here in the train doors. You could open the top door. These are the old passenger trains, Union Pacific. You open the top door, then you could open the bottom door like a Dutch door, and now you're on the platform, and you're just you and the great outside world. And there was a lady standing there. I said, what are you doing with those doors open? She says, I'm gonna jump. I said, whoa, 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 whoa. I ran and got Smitty. I said, Mr. Smith, there's a lady out there. She said she's gonna jump. He said, well, close the door behind her. Smitty was a card. But he insisted that we do our job. And so there I was, trying to do my job. I observed him when he was doing his job, which was to keep the train running, keep it on schedule, keep it on time, keep the passengers comfortable. And one lady was running through the train, had her baby in her arms, and she said, this man has insulted me, and I'm not gonna put up with him insulting me like this. I'll pull the cord and stop the train. Smitty said, well, calm down, ma'am, just calm down. I'll tell you what, when we get to the next stop, I personally will put him off the train, and I'm gonna treat you to dinner on us in a dining car. And maybe I can get a banana for you, little monkey. I was in a quandary about how to get you to see that sometimes we operate from a deficit perspective regarding our kids. And it's time now for you to abandon that and to embrace a talent development model. If you Google talent development, you'll find that there are lots of ways that you can accomplish a rigorous and relevant curriculum, an engaging learning environment by putting up literature, posters, particularly photographs and images or current events on the wall so that all the kids can see what all the other kids are about, and not concentrate on what they don't have, what they can't do, what their family doesn't have, and focus on their talent. Focus on the attributes that they bring to school. We use a concept called call and response. And call and response is very effective, and we use it all the time. In fact, we have a series of protocols, and as we get a chance to relate to one another, I hope that the people who get a chance to attend the workshop will take this with them, that they can tap into the strategies that have proven to be so very helpful, and abandoning the deficit model and embracing a talent development order. Because what the old system of schooling did, it had a vertical and rigid hierarchy of intellectual capacity. It's not valid. It's not valid. It's a talent sorting device. But as we sort, we disaffect. As we sort, we discourage. As we sort, we embrace differences rather than the potential for people to be all that they can be. We live in a multi-dimensional, multi-layered environment that we must help our students come to appreciate, and for too long that we've been preoccupied with a talent sorting model. So you've heard about engagement and how important it is. You've heard about rigor. Rigor is tied to the research on expectations. And you will see that in all of the research where schools are excellent, the expectations are what drive achievement among our kids. I teach aviation to middle schoolers. So we have a flight simulator lab, and I can point to photographs of the students who have succeeded in achieving the ability to fly a Cessna 172 plane. And they look like very common kids, but we've had that expectation that you can learn to read the gauges, to understand your altimeter, your speedometer, your airspeed indicator, your turn coordinator, and they can take off as you can very easily. Pull the stick back and you can take off. The question is, can you land? So I want to point to, and by the way, while we're in this climate, it's important for you to think about how you feel about the way things have gone. And I want you to know, this past summer and in summers past, I take students down to Fort Valley State University in Fort Valley, Georgia. And once I get to Atlanta and get the students situated, I went this year up to Tennessee State University in Nashville. And I drove all across the South. I drove from Atlanta into Chattanooga up to Nashville, Tennessee, and back. Then I went up to see my daughter in Charlotte, North Carolina, and drove up through Greenville and Spartanburg, South Carolina, into Charlotte, and then way out into the country, a little place called Pinehurst. And all that time, through all those miles that I traveled, I didn't see one conflict. I didn't see one bitter occasion, bitter encounter. What I saw was people who were just like you and me, trying to get their work done, trying to get to their destination, trying to round up enough groceries for dinner, trying to do their job. So I just want you to know, I was on the ground in the deep South, down in Opelika, Alabama. And what I encountered was gracious people, not yelpers. And I just want you to know that's the way much of the world is constructed, with the people having the same common values that we have, and who want peace, who are not looking for ways to exploit other people or even misbehave. My mentor is a gentleman by the name of, and I've had several, my mentor, Gene McCallum, was an outstanding principal in Los Angeles at McCallum Junior High. He was a Millikan scholarship winner. They gave him $25,000 as a recognition for how excellent he was. And this applies to you in your classroom and in your school. He said, I inspect what I expect. I inspect what I expect. So if I expect the students to take full advantage of this pocket dictionary and add to it space in the back for them writing their 10 words, when they get their 10 words down, they get 2 quarters. Every time I see them with their dictionary, they get a quarter. And you'd be surprised how that little artifact does add up. But when we installed the virtues in the school, truth, justice, propriety, reciprocity, balance, harmony, and order, when that became the language of the day, when that became, those ideas were posted all around, we had peace and a great reduction in referrals for discipline to the school office. A lot of time you'll go to the school office and you'll find those little guys in there, the same guys all the time. They need some help. But as an environment, as the climate, the best climate that you can have, you must inspect what you expect. Repeat after me. We can. I can't hear you. We can. Whenever and wherever we choose. Successfully teach. All children. His education is of interest to us. We already know more than we need in order to do this. Whether we do it or not must finally depend on how we feel. On how we feel about the fact that we haven't so far. God bless you. Thank you for being such a grand and gracious and attentive audience. I hope that we can do this again and again. If you have any questions, please write them on a piece of paper or a 3x5 card and let me have them with your email. I will answer the question to the best of my ability. I couldn't possibly tell you everything that I need to tell you in the short time that we've had, but I'm very appreciative of you as an audience. And thank you, Candy and Western Oregon University and the Oregon Department of Education for making it possible for me. God bless you. Thank you very much.